Last time I finished by saying that we had submitted for a building permit and the design process, of course, had gone well. So we were just waiting to begin construction. Once we got our building permit, then we would begin. So that's where this kicks off. We got our building permit really without a hassle, and it was about $3,000, I think. Now, this was pre-COVID, so who knows what it could be for you. Now, that covered both the main house and the ADU. Once we got the permits, then we knew we wanted to go. So off we went, and what we started with was excavation. We began by preparing for utilities. We were fortunate enough to get a piece of land that already had some utilities on it, namely a septic drain field and a supply water connection to the main municipal water. Those two alone cost a lot of money, so that lowered the price of our utilities construction significantly. We had to install a septic system, and we chose a pump system because we were pumping water uphill. The drain field was uphill from where we wanted to build the houses. Nothing we could really do about that unless we wanted to install a whole different drain field. That seems like a huge waste of money. So we went with the pump system. We also then needed to carry the water from the entrance to the property down to where we were building the houses. But that is a small cost compared to installing the water from the street. That's usually a very large cost. We got the utilities installed really without problems. That was fortunate. After that point, we had a problem or two show up, but we didn't know it. They were latent problems. And that was with the person we hired to help us with foundation. We knew going in we did not want to work with concrete. We knew nothing about actually installing concrete. None of us had done so before. And so we knew we wanted to hire a contractor for that. We didn't have much money, so we went with a low-cost contractor, and that was not a good choice. The guy had said very confidently he knew what he was doing. Later on, I found out I'm not so sure he did, at least not the finer points of it. The stem walls, which are the vertical pieces of concrete that are below the actual wood walls that get framed up, those turned out fine. We also had concrete slab floors in the house, which, again, low-cost contractors are who performed the job. The main contractor who we hired to oversee the job hired a couple guys who run a small concrete installing business. And those two guys, well, let's just say when I came home one day from work and I saw their beer bellies kind of lazily sweeping on the concrete, but not really paying much attention to what they were doing, and walking around in the areas they had already swept to get that kind of finish that's done, it didn't turn out well later on because we had the concrete sealed. Well, now we have some boot prints underneath the seal. So lesson is do not hire cheap contractors. When it came to installing the framing, we had one crucial thing that was very lucky. I don't have a better word for it. A friend of ours, in fact, the guy whose land we had just moved off of, was a long time and retired general contractor. So he knew a thing or two about putting houses together. And he helped us many times. He built many parts of our house with us, and even at least one of them, the stairwell, the framing of the stairs, he built entirely on his own. So I am eternally grateful to him for that help. He guided us, and he did work himself for no cost. That was invaluable to us. We did frame the walls ourselves with his help, and the wall framing, it went pretty well. Now, I would say the one hiccup we had, not really hiccup, but the one thing that was working against us was the wood. It was curved, a lot of the pieces, and we looked carefully at the lumber yards we went to and through the heaps of piles of wood that we had dropped off at our house from the main lumber drop when we first started building. And many of the pieces were warped. I think that's the word. Bowed or warped. I'm still not really sure on that nomenclature. And I think 3, maybe 4 times I requested to return the wood from the company that supplied us most of our wood, and they agreed to do so. But after, a few times, they said, hey, this is our premium quality wood. And if you're finding a problem with that, you're going to need to go somewhere else because we're not going to give you anything better. So it was what it was. And we ended up using various methods to make the wood work. You make the walls work. And ultimately, I wouldn't even know it if I moved into this house now. So it was a pain, certainly while building. But afterward, in the finished product, I wouldn't say it's really causing, the house to be lower quality. The walls I found fun, but the floor, now, when I say floors, I mean floor joists. That was fun. A little bit thrilling because I'm a little scared of heights. And so walking on those joists was a little nerve-wracking, especially when they were wobbly. But Doug, he just walked right across them, even when they were laid flat. That's the weak way, and they tend to bend, especially in the middle when you walk on them. But he was unfazed. He just would walk across them, go from one side to another, showing me how to install them. And yeah, we got through that pretty quickly. I think that honestly took us maybe 2 days, which is fast for us. I'm sure there's framers out there who can bang out, 1,200 square feet of floor joists in probably, I don't know, a few hours. But we were happy to have it done within a weekend. And that includes cutting and all that stuff, cutting, installing, securing. Yeah. And then finally, the roof trusses, the last part of the rough framing besides the sheathing. Oh my goodness, roof trusses. I found out they need to be installed precisely, or else it causes problems later on down the line in multiple different trades. I thought that it could be, the trusses could be 2 feet on center, plus or minus a little bit, half inch there, quarter inch there. No. Do roof trusses precisely, like to the 16th of an inch. You're going to have problems if you don't. So, lesson learned. There we go. Once the rough framing, and by that I mean studs, floor joists, and roof trusses, studs being walls, yeah. Once those were all done, installed, and assembled, then the sheathing needed to go on. Sheathing is, for those who don't know, it's the solid, usually 4 foot by 8 foot sheets of wood, usually plywood or OSB. We used OSB. I wish we'd used plywood. I've heard better reviews of it. But anyway, it is what it is. Those things go on the outside of the walls, on top of the floor, and on top of the roof trusses. That was something that we felt good about when we did it, I'll say. Floor sheathing, that went well. Wall sheathing, that went well. Or so we thought. The inspector came after we were done with the wall sheathing, and he looked around and he said, I'm seeing too many of these nails that are, I don't know, eighth of an inch, quarter inch below the surface of the sheathing face. That worries me. That's not going to perform very well in large storms. I'm going to need you to renail all this sheathing. Not the floor sheathing, that's good, but all the wall sheathing. Which is most of the sheathing, he didn't really need to tell us. But I looked at my wife, she looked back at me, and that was very frustrating news. So we spent at least another weekend, I don't remember, maybe 2, part of a second one, renailing all the sheathing. That is a lot of square feet, even for a small house like ours, a 1,200 square foot footprint. That took a while and was quite the bummer, so make sure you set your air pressure to only let the nails be on the face of the sheathing. If anything, be slightly outside, then you can just take out your hammer, tap, 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 and make the nails flush. Yeah, learned that one the hard way. All right, so then the framing for a fair amount of the house was done. However, there was one part of the house that we wanted to hire someone to help us with, and that was the front. The house, the shape is rather plain. However, the front is where we put effort into it. And by the way, when I'm speaking about the house, we were working on the house and the ADU both. So that took a fair amount of time keeping those up, but we knew we wanted to finish them together. So there we go. We made the front of the house and the ADU have similar looks, which is with glulam beams. Using glulam beams, I should say, to make bulky looking and staunch trusses. They are not structural. Well, I mean, the horizontal beams are, but the filler for the trusses is purely decorative. It's aesthetic. And it gives a kind of a simple log cabin look to the house, which we really like. For a plain design, that front on each of those houses does a lot to make them look appealing. We knew we wanted help with that though, because we did not have the strength, of course, just to lift them up manually, and we did not know how to operate heavy equipment, which normal people, contractors and people who knew what they were doing would use to install these things. So we hired a contractor. We looked for someone and we got word from a friend about a contractor who actually lived in our neighborhood and he was low price. So we thought, sweet. And so he ended up helping us with the deck, which is on the front of the house, which is also an integral part of the truss system. It basically, there's 2-story posts that go up, and then there's the deck above the first story, and then the glulam truss is above the second story, just at the level of the roof. And he helped us with that. We could not have done that on our own. Not very easily, anyway. Not very quickly either, which was very important. This contractor, his main bread and butter was installing roofing. And so he also offered to help us install the roof sheathing on top of the trusses. We said, sure, yeah, that sounds good. So he installed both the roof sheathing and the metal roofing. Again, I'm afraid of heights, so I was grateful for him to work with that. The third and final part that he helped us with, which was after he finished with installing the deck, the glulam truss, and the roof sheathing and metal roofing, he also helped us install the siding. By helped us, I mean he did it all himself, which included the building wrap. So we installed the sheathing ourselves, but then he got the Tyvek, Typar, don't remember which one it is, and he installed that. And then he also installed the lap siding that we have. Now, a little bit of something to keep in mind. Don't let contractors loose to basically make their own decisions, like any sort of significant decision, including buying, because we told him to purchase Hardy Plank lap siding. I had told him that specifically. Well, he conveniently forgot when he got to the lumber yard and purchased a bunch of LP wood lap siding. It's a lot cheaper because it's not fiber cement, it's wood. But it doesn't have the fire protection level and really the look and the feel that I wanted for the house. The ADU didn't have that, so this wasn't a problem with it. So he was a stubborn fella. And so he said, well, I don't want to return all of this stuff. Plus, I've already installed a significant amount on one side of your house. So, unless you want to waste time, then you can leave it on that one side of your house. So we said, well, that's a lot of lap siding on there already, and we're keeping an eye on the calendar. Yeah, go ahead and let it be on there. But all the other sides, doing Hardy Plank. So he did. He went and got that. But again, lesson, do not let contractors just run with what they're going to do. Keep a close eye on them. He finished that, and we were glad those things were done with the house, the siding and building wrap, the deck and glulam truss, and the roof sheathing and metal roofing. We were also glad to be done with him. That's a long story, but I'll just keep it to that. As we were framing the walls, we knew that we wanted some help, and so I came up with this idea. I had spent the last 3 or 4, I think 4 years, learning how to use Revit very well. And one thing I had learned how to do was to install framing members, individual framing members. And long story short, that's not necessarily easy to do for someone who's just doing simple architectural work in that software. So what I did then was I modeled every wall stud, every bottom plate, every double top plate, every floor joist, all that stuff, and then made diagrams for each section of wall, each first story section of wall, and we knew exactly where to put each stud and where to drill holes for anchor bolts, stuff like that. It was incredibly useful. I highly recommend doing some sort of planning, whether you use Revit or not for it. Just detail out where each framing member is going to go ahead of time, especially for those who are not contractors by trade, as your day job. You don't do it regularly. Draw it out, plan it out ahead of time. It is well worth the time because then you can also use that to coordinate the utilities later on down the line. And even if you're really zealous about doing this planning, then also draw in where the utilities will go. I recommend not on the same framing diagrams, make them separate so that you can have a diagram for installing the framing, and then you can have a diagram for coordinating and also installing each of the utilities. Coordinate all those wires and ducts and conduits and pipes and stuff. It will be well worth it. I made the framing diagrams. I didn't go the whole way through with the utilities diagrams because we were using time at that point. I was spending time making the diagrams instead of building, so I needed to hurry it up in that sense to make it so that we completed the house and the ADU within the 2-year permit deadlines. With that, the framing was complete. We had structures that looked like houses, and we were elated. This was great. We were at least halfway. Just kidding. We thought so, but later on we found out there's a lot of work to do inside and outside still. Yeah. By the time we wound up the framing process, our schedule and our wallet were both being stretched almost to breaking points. So we knew something had to give. And I will let you know what we sacrificed in the next video. I'll see you there.